Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Sans, for inviting us to come talk today. I'm really honored to be representing MITRE Ingenuity here to talk about our project. This has been a long time coming in terms of the overall project, and we hope to continue to build this with the help of the community. So what I'm here to talk about is our project, CTI Blueprints, which is focused on helping teams understand and produce tangible, actionable reports for their key constituencies and help build that process and foundation as they kind of scale and mature as teams, as individuals, as you enter into the realm of CTI. A little bit about myself. I've been in government and doing intelligence and cyber for roughly 15 years now. Bounced in and out of the USG as an all-source analyst and the private sector, doing a lot of this building of teams and products and services, both for internal constituencies as well as in consultative role. So I've really seen a lot of the pain points that exist out there in terms of how you stand up new CTI teams, how you move from slinging indicators to something that is strategic intelligence and all of the things in between. So with that, getting into the CTI Blueprints itself. Fundamentally, the problem we're trying to address is helping teams, especially new teams, stand up, mature, grow, and build that accountable structure that allows you to onboard rapidly and address multiple constituencies as your team grows and gains that street cred within your organization. Fundamentally, a lot of the problems that we've seen is teams are overburdened. They tend to have a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds that aren't necessarily trained in all the finer points of how you actually move from data through production and make sure that you're actually hitting on the key points that are consumable for the people that are actually going to be taking action. So no CTI presentation is complete without the intelligence cycle. It is the cornerstone, the touch point of all of us who grew up in USG doing these types of building and production. And so the way that I like to think about this is really break this down into your production piece in terms of what are the problems that we saw a lot of the CTI teams doing, and then your dissemination piece. So for production, it's really that bottom 60% of that intel cycle. When you have a new team, when you have new people joining teams, before you've had the time to hit critical scale, build a lot of your processes, you tend to have one or two people that come in. And they might be rock stars. They might be fantastic at what they do. But because of that, they are continually being forced to do too much. And so you end up getting this cult of personality where that one person's biases get drifted down to the rest of the team. You end up having a lot of really good work that might come out of those teams, but it's unstructured. You don't have the time to actually build the processes in place to onboard new team members. And over time, you end up getting this drift where you end up being really excellent in one or two things while you're being demanded to do 10 or 11, and the rest of them tend to have problems, tend to fail, and you start burning through that credibility that got you the team to start with. And so what we really wanted to dig into is how do you address some of these systemic problems? How do you increase the ability of your team to build that foundational piece, build those frameworks, and onboard successfully so you can address the totality of what you're being required to do, rather than focusing purely on what we used to be good at and what got us in here. And the other piece that we found is especially problematic, especially for the new folks that are moving in. When you have people who are dual-hatted, for example, your incident responder who's also doing some CTI on the side before you get fully stood up, there's a difference between understanding the technical aspect and knowing how to translate that to a non-technical constituency. There's a difference between being able to reverse a piece of malware and then explain it in plain English. And so being able to translate that technical knowledge, translate those skills that allow you to bring real value and meaning to something that is outside of the comfort zone of the person who's going to be reading your report, adds additional value and allows your team to grow and mature and brings in those additional resources, which allows you to build critical mass and continue moving. And that brings us to the audience part of this, right? If you're producing intelligence just for yourself, you have failed. If you get through this entire production cycle and the person who's supposed to read your report doesn't understand it, or it's too long for them to consume, you have failed. It doesn't matter how good you are at turning data into an insight if that insight is not consumable for the people you're supposed to be informing. And that is one of those things that I think is often neglected when you start talking about building intelligence teams, because it's the hard part, it's the squishy part, it's the part that doesn't rely on data, it's the part that relies on interpersonal dynamics. And those change based off of your organization, those change based off of the constituency that you're talking to, and they change based off of the type of intelligence you're trying to produce. Whether it's tactical level, supporting those people who are on the ground in your SOC, in your incident response team, in your hunt teams, or you're dealing with the CFO, the CEO, who has maybe a minute and a half to consume what you're trying to tell them before they go make an important decision. Who you're talking to and what they care about are critical to this entire process. And that's one of the things that we tried to focus on as we were building out this project, is to give teams at least a foundational idea of what those types of constituencies would care about and how you might be able to write towards those different audiences. Obviously, these are things that are going to be tailored to your organization, but fundamentally, it's about giving you a leg up so that way there's reference material to go back to as you try to mature and grow. And so with that solution, we basically broke this into two parts. One is templates and writing to teach people how to understand, to go from that data to something that an end consumer can do. And then the other piece is actually technology to help reduce the manual burden on producing a lot of these reports and reduce that human error, and also enable CTI reports to not only be that human readable glossy PDF that I think we're all very familiar with, but also enable the machine to machine type interaction. So that way you can take those IFCs, that data, and use it in multiple venues without introducing a human in the loop, which slows down your reaction time, slows down your mitigation efforts, and increases human error. So the first part that I want to talk about is the blueprints templates themselves. This project built out 4 to start with. We're looking at a second iteration. So if there are others here that you'd love to see, happy to talk about those and see if we can add them into the second iteration. But fundamentally, we chose these 4 reports because they hit on the core constituencies that most CTI programs deal with. The first one, the threat actor report, is actually mostly an internal product. And this is incredibly valuable because it is the encyclopedia where you're taking that tribal knowledge, that one expert who's really good at China, that one expert that's really good at Russia or ransomware, and you're forcing them to compend a volume that talks about it in the detail and provides the right language. So when you have a tasker from an executive, when you have a request that comes down, you already have language that you can pull from. You already understand roughly what the threat is, roughly what is going on. So that way you can pull that and put it into other products and save that time and focus on the net new or the key piece that that particular constituency needs, rather than going back and reinventing the wheel, doing all the research multiple times. And so this is really probably the longest report that we have a template for, because it is meant to be sliced and diced for the other products to provide that additional value and reduce your time for production. The intrusion analysis report is really about close ties iteration with your SOC, incident responders, and threat hunters. This is designed to be a good enough report. And I know that can be really hard for a lot of us in CTI that want to show all that we know about it, give a complete picture. But when you're dealing with incident response, when you're dealing with threat hunting, time is the most critical value. If you can get them something that they can use in action, that counts for a whole lot more than taking a week to give them a complete picture of what's going on. And so this report was designed to be iterative, and it helps encourage CTI teams to get out of that mode of, I'm going to give you a complete picture and focus on, here are the key things that a hunter would need or an incident responder would need to identify whether this activity looks like this threat actor or this represents this risk. And the goal is to help build that virtuous cycle where that threat hunt team, that incident response team then takes the data that they find and feeds it back to you so you can refine it. And over time, this product should hopefully see 4 or 5 revisions. And so the campaign report is really focused on change. That change is the delta between what we knew before and what's going on now, with a focus on why should I care? change in and of itself doesn't matter, right? If you change a spearfishing lure in a fishing campaign, what is the actionable information out of that? With campaign reports, you should really be focusing on, I am producing for a specific constituency, and they need to be able to heed a call to action and make an informed change off of that report. And so this is very much focusing on those delta analysis in a way to support better defense, better decision-making at the executive level. Whoever your constituency actually is, this report should very much be focused on helping them make a decision faster, better, with a better outcome. With the executive report, we really tried to focus on how to synthesize that data into something that an executive has the potential to action and deal with. In my old life, we used to say that you only got 2 sentences with your principal. That it doesn't matter how much information you know, it doesn't matter how much you want to put in that report. Fundamentally, they don't have time to read it. Fundamentally, they don't understand. Fundamentally, they don't have the ability or the time to dig deep into it. That first 2 sentences is all you're going to get. So if you don't have that bottom line up front, if you don't have the ability to catch their attention and inform the decision they're thinking about in that moment, you're never going to convey that knowledge. And the best you're going to get is for that executive to give that report to one of their subordinates to read the next 2 pages. And so this report is very much focused on being compact, 3 pages, where you're highlighting that key decision point for the executive. So that way you can help them make better decisions in a timely manner and not be a burden to them. Because the executive communications is about informing that decision and helping them do what they need to get done in the time frame that they have with the attention span that they have. And so the executive report is very much focused on providing that clear decision focus and making sure that you are talking relevantly to that decision maker. And so with these templates, we really wanted to focus on giving people not only who they're writing the report for, and not only what data that constituency cares the most about, but it is about giving that blueprint for those producers to basically be able to understand how that changes based off that constituency. And so for each of these reports, if there are multiple constituencies that might be able to consume them, we wanted to outline how to make those decisions of what they care about, how you should write towards that particular audience, and what they need to make the decisions that they routinely make. And of course, this is a broad-based approach. It's going to have to be tailored to your specific organizations. Every team takes on their own identity. But this should be a good way to kickstart that process internally for you to be able to modify it and make it your own rather than having to come up with it from scratch. Additionally, each section has prescriptive language around how you should be writing that section. So you can give these templates to a brand new team member, and they should be able to read these and go, oh, I understand for the SOC, they need these pieces of data to make the decisions that they care about based off of this type of report. And I need to write it in such a way that I'm grabbing that executive readership right off the top and they realize that this is something they can action or that they should read further into. It is about giving net new analysts or people who are transitioning in the field a step-by-step process on how to start constructing an intelligence report in a way that is meaningful for that end constituency so it's usable. So that way folks have the ability to actually pick this up, read it, consume it, and action it so that way you get a virtuous reinforcement cycle of being able to take that, action it, and then go give you feedback on what was useful, what wasn't, so you can adjust. In addition to the templates, we produced 4 reports to allow teams to not only give those new analysts the blueprint onto how you build these reports, but to give them a target to shoot for. Because there's a difference between saying you need to include such and such data in a report and saying here are the pros associated with that that allows a team to consume it. And so with this project, we thought it was vitally important to be able to give that full step through process from what you need to include from a data perspective, how you should be thinking about writing it, to what good writing looks like. And this is a fantastic way for those new team members to build out that capability, because we all know the traditional method for onboarding new team members: point them towards the shared drive, have them read the report that somebody produced at one point and say, try to rebuild that. This gives them the pathway to do that. And obviously, as teams make adjustments, make changes, they can change these templates, they can change what the good product looks like. But by maintaining this process, it allows new analysts to actually see how the bricks are laid, how the process is built, which allows them to come up to speed quicker and produces a repeatability that a lot of new teams or maturing teams currently lack, because it is based off of that cult of personality, that one rock star analyst that has done things and everybody's trying to chase it. This creates a process for production which enables repeatability and increases the ability of the team to produce against multiple targets. In addition to those templates, in addition to the reports, we also built two tools. The first tool is an authoring tool, and this tool really is about two things. One is reducing human error as you're creating the report itself. The other is about being able to take that intelligence report that is created and deliver it up both as a machine-to-machine readable JSON, but also enable the ability to go back to that glossy PDF that a lot of people associate with CTI production. The reason why we really wanted to focus on that ability to do machine-to-machine in addition to the human readable is that a lot of new teams, a lot of maturing teams don't necessarily have the technology support to really integrate well with orchestration and defensive countermeasures. And so by producing the report as a JSON, it allows a SOC team or a security architecture team to take that data in a repeatable format that is structured and put it into their defensive systems without a lot of human intervention, which further reduces human error, but also increases speed to detection, increases speed to defense, which makes your production more relevant to them. The publishing tool takes that JSON file and then converts it back to that kind of glossy PDF that we all know and associate with CTI production. Right now, it only does Word documents and PDFs, but we're looking to expand on extensibility to other formats in a way to support broader base production and support its utility. Now, with the authoring tool, we added a couple of fields that we felt were vitally important for teams, especially as they're maturing through the cycle, that we've noticed tends to get dropped off. The first is the criticality of the report. So we all produce a lot of intelligence. We all produce a lot of reports for a bunch of different constituencies within our organizations or external organizations. Not all reports have the same impact. And that's okay, they're not supposed to. Understanding what you are providing for your constituency and what they need to do with it enables them to build trust with you. Not every report's going to be critical. Not every report's going to burn down the SOC process and say, you need to do this immediately. Properly marking it as such allows you to build that trust with the SOC, with your constituency, with your customer, because you are helping them rack and stack your production, going from you need to stop everything and address this to if you have some time later today, this might be of interest to you. And by properly labeling that, you're helping your consumers understand what is going on. The other critical piece here that we felt needed to be front and center is sensitivity. And this is something that we see out of CTI reporting a lot, but especially as you're dealing with incident response, especially as you're dealing with internal data, there is going to be company sensitivity. There's going to be attorney-client privilege. And a lot of CTI reporting loses that marking because they don't understand what they're dealing with. So by having this field in the template itself, front and center, it forces the producer to realize what data they're entering in and how that needs to be appropriately handled. Because if you release a report with company-sensitive data in it and it's not properly controlled, or you release a report that's based off of IR data that should be under attorney-client privilege and is losing that marking, you've now opened up the company to liability. And that is something that's going to burn trust and make sure that you're sitting on the outside of some of the most critical things that a CTI team can produce against. The other piece of this that we're really focused on from a tool building perspective is how do you reduce human error? We all deal with IOCs all day long. It's almost impossible to catch a typo in a malware hash, right? It's almost impossible to catch a typo in a list of 150 IPs. The tool is designed to help you down select to the appropriate data and make sure that you can upload data at scale from CSV files, et cetera. And so with the tool itself, anything that can be a drop-down menu, anything that can be automatically down selected will be. So for example, we have a hyperlink to defend that is automatically tied to the technique. So that field will auto-populate to reduce the need to go look things up. As you down select through the different fields here, the menus themselves get shorter based off of the data you've already entered in. So you don't need to memorize the entire attack matrix. The tool will help you figure out which one you need to put in automatically, so you're not spending a bunch of time on a web page, switching context, and trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. Additionally, it was critical for us to be able to do CSV uploads. So if you do have a tip, if you did get those indicators from a file being shared through a trust group or whatever, there is an easy way to upload these at scale so you aren't hand jamming between an Excel spreadsheet and the tool itself. And this, again, is all about reducing that human error, reducing the amount of time it takes to actually produce these things. And frankly, I think we've all fought with a CSV to Word copy and paste. This does the nice formatting for you already. So you don't have to spend a lot of time formatting that Word document, dealing with those issues that I think we've all spent far too much time trying to just make work because Control-C, Control-V doesn't work between Microsoft products. And the last piece here that we thought was critically important in terms of inclusion is intelligence requirements. Going back to that intelligence lifecycle, if you aren't capturing why you produce this report, you're never going to be able to build and grow your program. And so this is as important as for actual production, so you know why you produced it, but also for metrics on the back end. From a manager's perspective, from a growing your production capability, from understanding which constituencies you serve and why. Understanding some of this metadata around Intel requirements, production value is critical to be able to up-level your entire program. And so by having these, which is a customizable field that you can force everybody to produce against change periodically, fundamentally, this allows a manager to go pull all the reports you've done and say, okay, we produced 100 CTI reports this year. How many are against which Intel requirements, and how well were they received? What other feedback did we get? It helps you start building some of those metrics that are so hard to capture with CTI production. So that way the manager can then either go talk to constituencies that are underserved and say, we didn't actually produce that much against this Intel requirement. Is there something else that you need from us? Or say, we're overproducing for the SOC. 90% of what we did was for the SOC. They love us. They know how valuable we are. Maybe we shift some effort, reduce some of that so we can expand back out. This insight, even at the rudimentary statistics level, enables teams to focus their production and build value across the board. So what is the overall impact that we hope to create with this? Fundamentally, it is to reduce that production burden on those teams. It's a tool to help teams scale faster and have better, consistent output across the board, which builds better analysts and a better community writ large. It's to reduce that training burden. As you onboard new people, especially people who are cross-training from technical skill sets, some of the hardest things are dealing with gray, so not having a yes or no answer, and how do you write this up in a way that's impactful? This tool will hopefully help support that writing for impact and give a clear guideline to aggressively ramp up new individuals. The machine-readable format is, I think, a godsend for those small teams that don't have the technology integrations that a lot of the bigger teams have, the more mature teams have. Being able to push indicators to technical teams in a way that they can do automatic ingestion is a game changer in terms of how you can help enable them to do things better and faster, which makes your team stickier. And ultimately, one of the things that I think a lot of CTI programs run into in terms of problems is, how do you justify your existence over time? It's easy to say you answered the RFI for the executive. It's harder to prove how you defended the organization. This type of output significantly improves those statistics and allows you to create that narrative around why the CTI team is enabling everybody, not just the pet project of a CISO or an executive who decided they needed one. And then finally, it's about institutional knowledge. It's about maturing programs. It's about providing you a path forward that doesn't rely on that tribal knowledge, doesn't rely on that rock star, and a way to provide that standard for folks as they build it out. So hopefully at this point, I haven't bored you all to tears and you're actually interested in the project. Here's a QR code that you can scan that will take you directly to all of these resources that I just talked about. Everything's hosted on GitHub. We're in the process of scoping out what a version 2 of this might look like. We very much encourage everybody in the community, take a look at it, give feedback, tell us what we got right, what we got wrong, what you'd like to see in future iterations. Really, this project is about trying to support the community as we grow it, as we build out new programs. And so any feedback you all have, we're very willing to listen to. I'm always happy to have conversations about this. Anything we can do to make CTI as professionalized as SOC and other parts of the cybersecurity community, it's a passion project of mine. So please take a look, let us know what you have. And then finally, I got to talk a little bit about the organization that allowed me to do this work. The Center for Threat Informed Defense is a part of MITRE that is really focused on interfacing with the private sector. And intelligence is a core component to everything that we do. You can't have threat-informed defense without threat intelligence. And so everything that we're doing is trying to underpin how you build a more complete security program. And intelligence, I'm a little biased, is the beginning of that for everything, right? And so really CTID is focused on building open source projects so everybody can use them. They're publicly available to help build security across the board. Intelligence is the key underpinning of that. So if you've looked at our other projects, if you have ideas for additional work where you see gaps in the community, please reach out to us. We're always looking for new ideas and new ways to help all of you do your jobs easier and better. With that, thank you, everybody.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Ross. A lot of great information. I think a great talk to kind of kick off on foundationally here in the new to CTI track. Folks online, thanks for your patience. The internet kind of went down for a minute. So don't worry, folks in person, y'all got to see the whole talk. Folks online, don't worry, it was recorded. I'm watching our awesome AV team, so you can catch up later. But lots of links to check out. And luckily, we have a couple minutes for questions. So I'll start with Slack questions, but folks in person, if you raise your hand, I will run a mic down to you. We're happy to hear your questions as well. So first one, and this could be a broad question or applied to CTI blueprints, talking about managing intelligence for a lot of orgs. So someone's saying, hey, my CTI team has to manage intel for 300 plus unique organizations. I feel this, right, as a vendor supporting a lot of orgs. Any thoughts on generally, or how could you use blueprints for that?
So I think I'll start generally and then transition a bit into blueprints. It's all about your requirements and why you're producing to begin with. Understanding what are the requirements for you and why are they being asked for of you. Odds are if you're supporting 300 some odd organizations, they probably have some consistent needs. Generally, they're binnable by some characteristic.
Probably care about ransomware, right?
Yeah, well,
probably.
Yeah. And so if you can build that structure around your intel requirements, understand why the production needs to happen, you can then start organizing your teams to support those larger groups while giving that kind of fundamental flair. And I think the transition to blueprints here is if you have identified what those core products are, who those core constituencies are, you can build templates out for them. You can build that structure around what needs to be produced. So that way they have the team has the ability to hit that mark and constantly get that feedback cycle to help improve what you're trying to produce against.
Nice. Someone asking, and I have one, if you come across similar initiatives or projects that might be complementary or supplementary to CTI blueprints, anything you can think of? I got one, so
You got
I'll
one?
post it in the Slack. So Lenny Zeltzer, who authors an awesome stance course about writing, actually has some templates for like incident response reports. So I've seen a couple other templates out there. I will say that tool, like that's pretty awesome. Like the ability to track to your requirements. So I haven't seen anything quite like that. Maybe some threat intel platforms will let you do that, but curious if there's anything else you can think of.
I was going to point to some of those templates that are around online as well. And I think, with any resource, it's about how applicable it is to your organization. And I would encourage people to do some Googling around it. I think incident response has a significant number of frameworks that exist out there. There's a lot of writing for the defender, writing for the incident responder that exists out there. As a CTI person, you should absolutely be looking at all that and figuring out what you can incorporate. Because if that's how they produce their reports, what you're producing should tie into that almost one-to-one. And so the more we can expand our understanding and viewpoint of how everybody in the security organization does their job, the better these types of things are. And so I would very much encourage people to be interdisciplinary on this.
The other thing I like to do is, in your RSS feed, right, whatever reports you're looking at, I like to look at other teams' reports and be like, that's cool. I like having that section. Like they had an Intel Gap section, or they have a really nice MITRE TTP table that goes to the procedure level, not just the technique level, hint, hint. And so taking those notes back to my team, like, hey, let's do this thing. So if anyone else has other resources you like, drop those in the Slack channel. Happy to share that. So we have a question in person. So give me a moment to run down. We can pass the mic, the joys of the hybrid experience. I'm going to get a good workout today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Great stuff. Name's Brandon. Similar background, about 20 plus years Intel, Cybercom, NSA, all the good people, right? So one of the things being on the outside now that seems a little difficult is that we know how to do the job, right? As far as Intel and stuff like that. But what I don't see a lot of focus on is collection or Intel planning, right? So that Rosetta Stone for taking the word PIR and communicating that to either the person in charge of risk or stuff like that. Is MITRE focused on that at all? Do y'all have any tools or even a possible Rosetta Stone for that?
We don't have any tools currently. This is a topic that I think is under active discussion within CTID about how you can have impact there. There are a couple folks that are trying to attack this from kind of, I'd say, entry kind of level. Brian Moore also has a startup that is trying to focus on how you transition to key intelligence requirements and how that works in the private sector. I think fundamentally, my personal view on this, so not representing MITRE, nothing official, is Intel requirements are so hard because it's almost like elicitation. You're having an active conversation with that key stakeholder and you're trying to pull things out of them that they don't know how to talk about, right? If you go talk to a CFO, they're going to talk numbers. They're going to talk profit and loss statements. None of that translates into cyber threats, right? If you can't talk their language, if you can't ask them the pointed question, the leading question to get them comfortable speaking in their own language to reveal what they're actually concerned about, it's going to be incredibly hard to build out a PIR that's impactful for them on the back end. And that's where I think it's as much of a human problem as it is a technology one. And it's something that I think as a community, it's a systemic problem that we all need to get better at. And it goes back to getting that face time with the people who are actually going to be using your intelligence and figuring out their language. So that way you can pull out of them what you need to, so you can then go do your collection management, do your exploitation of that data, and hopefully produce something on the back end that actually satisfies that core decision that they're trying to make. not the requirement that they actually gave you.
And we'll have other talks. We've had talks in previous CTI summits. There's a great one from Andreas. I'll see if I can dig up the link on requirements. And we have a talk coming up today from Brett on connecting to decision makers. So very much the same vein of you have to talk to some humans and elicit the requirements. I like that, like a game of 20 questions. All right, we have time maybe for, if there's one more in person, I'll come down for an in-person question.
Thanks, Ross. My name is also Brandon, so I'll throw that out there. Quick question on, knowing your stakeholder is obviously really, really important. But outside of just the qualitative or subjective aspect of going to that stakeholder to say, hey, are we hitting what you need to hit on? Do you have any thoughts on like maybe more of a quantitative approach to understand like how you're doing with, giving them the intel that they're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer, it depends on what constituency you're talking about, right? If you're talking tactical SOC, it gets a whole lot easier. If you are giving them net new indicators, net new TTPs that previously weren't defended against or previously weren't things that they're aware of, you can build your metrics around their detections, their implementations, and you can get a virtuous cycle going between what the SOC is actually defending against and what they're seeing and what you've told them about. That's the easy use case. The harder use cases get up to that operational strategic level where the returns on that investment get more nebulous. If, for example, you're supporting mergers and acquisitions activity and you give key information about how attacked a potential target is. If they choose to go with it anyways, did you not have impact or did they change the deal? How do you get insight into that? A lot of that's going to be in channels that you'll never have access to. Conversely, if the deal falls through, was that because of the information you provided or was it something else? You might not get in actual insight into that, but the kind of tangential observables is how often are they coming back to ask you questions? How often are they interacting with you? That gives you kind of that second order effect to get direction as to what you're doing is valuable or not. And eventually you'll break through and start getting something that is more tangible and actually metrics driven.
Excellent. Well, we will leave it there. There are a couple other questions in the Slack channel if you have a chance to go in and reply. But Ross, awesome talk. Thank you so much for
Thank you
kicking us
so
off.
much.